Hi, everyone. This is Dave Roberts, your host of the Teaching Journeys podcast. And I want to take the opportunity to speak with my audience and anybody else who may be listening prior to the launch of our 300th episode, which will occur, if all goes according to plan, on August 18th, 2026. Just to give a little bit of background for those who have not heard of the Teaching Journeys podcast before. Our first episode dropped on March 31st, 2023. It was a year-long process getting this going. I had two very persistent students at Utica University, where I'm an adjunct professor of psychology, child life, and health studies, who insisted that I do a podcast. And when I asked them what I would have to offer on a podcast, they said, just bring the lessons from your death, dying, and bereavement class into the podcast world, and you'll be fine. I've been teaching at Utica University in Utica, New York for over 23 years now. And one of the courses that I teach regularly is death, dying, and bereavement. So it seemed to be a natural transition to be able to bring that material into the podcast world. The first episode was launched with a dear friend and mentor, the Reverend Patty Furino, who was responsible for facilitating a spiritually transformative experience in November of 2010, approximately 7 years after the transition from the physical world to the spiritual world of my 18-year-old daughter, Janine, due to a very aggressive and rare form of cancer. Now, Janine transitioned on March 1st, 2003. Now, prior to meeting through pure serendipity, Reverend Furino, I was always a science-based guy. I believe that if you couldn't see it, experience it, feel it in a tangible way with all of your senses, then it didn't exist. Spirituality was not something I even considered. But when the unthinkable happens, such as the death of a child, it really causes you to take pause and reevaluate the values, priorities, and rules that kept you safe and your world predictable. It also compels you to look at different perspectives in order to get through that very challenging transition in our lives. But anything that I experienced or I read that wasn't necessarily science-based, I had trouble wrapping my head around because I wasn't at that stage of my grief where I was able to or ready to entertain that. But things changed. And in 2010, that transformative weekend at Patty's home in Long Island spurred a lot of curiosity on my part. And when Patty started introducing different spiritual perspectives to me, I began to explore those and see how they could align with my science-based background. And lo and behold, I found that there's both a place for spirituality, the mystery of the universe, and science. I also learned that there is survival of consciousness. We can connect with the energy of our loved ones at any time, and we can transform the relationship by developing continued bonds with our loved ones in spirit. In that way, we integrate our grief, we integrate the best parts of our loved ones into the narrative of our own lives, and together we move forward in service to help others with those characteristics of our loved ones inside of us. So essentially, we become a package deal. Now, I know individuals are afraid of, and perhaps I was too, is that if you entertain different beliefs or incorporate different beliefs into your belief system, that means your core beliefs have to change as well. Well, that's not the case. Patty taught me that we can add beliefs in addition to the core beliefs we already have. We don't have to abandon anything. We can simply choose to expand our belief systems with different perspectives that resonate with us. And there's a lot of different perspectives out there that are not science-based. There's yoga, there's meditation, there's Reiki. The science has begun to prove that yoga, meditation, Reiki, and holistic and spiritual practices can improve mental and physical well-being. But there is a lot to choose from. It's about belief expansion. And that's one of the things that I've really emphasized in all the podcast episodes. It's expanding our belief systems, developing critical thinking, so we can learn to live in a world that is now fundamentally different after challenge. The mantra of the podcast is that we're all students and teachers, so let's learn from each other. Every guest contributor I have has been my teacher, and I have been the student. My job is to simply ask questions, provide observations, provide input that's going to allow each guest contributor's story to be authentically represented. It's not about performance art. It's not about controversy. It's not about challenging how that individual believes. It's bearing witness to that individual's belief system, seeking to understand it, and seeing what perspectives they have that can align with our integrated belief systems and that can serve as impetus for continued belief expansion. When the podcast first developed, I had many individuals who had experienced profound grief and loss, not necessarily related to death, but loss nonetheless. But they were willing to share the tools that they incorporated to help them transcend those challenges and share those with the objective of helping others going through their own challenges, or who simply just wanted to improve the quality of life. But like grief, like life, the podcast began to evolve. I not only featured individuals who were grieving, but executive coaches, therapists, trauma-informed coaches who had lived experience to share, who were willing to share what they had learned from working with other clients. If anybody told me when I first started that I'd be at 300 episodes, I might have been a little skeptical because I wasn't sure where this was going to go when I first started. But one of the things that I knew is I was going to give it my best shot. And I think having almost 300 episodes in the hopper at this point is a testament, maybe to my persistence, maybe to the longevity of the podcast. But I believe it's more a testament to the great guest contributors that I've had, who are too numerous to name here. But I want to take the opportunity to thank every guest contributor that I've had that have left their indelible impact on my audience. Every story, every challenge that they have shared has contributed to the development of community. And community is an important piece if we're going to transcend any type of challenges in our lives. We can't do this alone. I didn't find all of these great guest contributors on my own. I have several people to thank. First of all, I want to thank a couple of people who have been supportive of me right from the beginning. One is Patty Furino, who's again been a great friend and mentor to me throughout the years. Mario Fields, a podcast for himself, who took his time to guide me in terms of finding the right tools to use for the podcast. He also walked me through how to set up my YouTube channel. He's also the face and voice behind the introduction to the podcast. And I've had individuals that have simply wanted to meet him just so they could meet the voice itself. I also want to thank several other individuals who have been supportive of me, in particular, two great podcast agents, Noemi Barris and Anastasia Lipsky, who have referred wonderful guest contributors to me. Some other great podcast hosts, Chris Mamone, John Emery, and Steve Ramona, who have been very supportive of my efforts to provide my audience with quality guest contributors. And finally, three other individuals who I consider to be dear friends as well as great podcast hosts, Candace Snyder, Dawn Whitty, and Portia Booker, who have been supportive of me beyond my wildest dreams. And I am grateful for everybody who's been a part of our community. And one of the things I do want to emphasize is that, yes, we are a community. Podcasters have this wonderful community where we share tips, where we share strategies, we share guest contributors. We are all aligned with one singular purpose. That is to feature individual stories that are going to have a greater impact on the world and whose impact are going to last for generations and generations to come. And that is the hope. People may wonder, do I have another 300 episodes in me? I can't even begin to answer that. But I will continue with the podcast as long as there's a demand for it, as long as I feel that there's a message still to be given. I have learned that when a chapter of my life closes, I've learned to walk away from it without any regrets. It may take me a little while, but I eventually get there. But I'm not going anywhere for now. This podcast is going to continue, and we have some great episodes lined up behind 300. So I hope that you will stay with me for the ride. I hope that you will support the podcast in any way you can, either by sharing an episode, subscribing to my YouTube channel, subscribing to the podcast on Apple, Spotify, or other platforms where podcasts are played. And it's not going to cost you a dime to follow or subscribe. Everything I do with this podcast is an extension of the service work I've learned to embrace since the transition of my daughter. So anything you can do to help me further that message would be much appreciated. And with that, I want to thank everybody for their support for the first 300 episodes, and let's see what further adventures await us. And with that, this is Dave Roberts signing off for now, wishing you peace.